Welcome to episode 8 of ITP, the International Teacher Podcast. We are joined by a teaching couple that's been overseas for over 10 years. They have taught in Venezuela at 2 different schools at different times and share stories now from Maine about their current position in Mexico City. We'd like to welcome Scotty and Tara. Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Greg, the single guy, and Matt, the family guy. We're recording episodes from around the globe to tell you about the best kept secret in education. That's right, it's teaching overseas. We're glad to have you.
Ladies and gentlemen, international teachers, friends, family, people who are thinking about going overseas, people who are just bored in general and locked in their house because of a global pandemic. This is the International Teacher Podcast. I am Matt, the family guy, and with me is
Greg, the single guy. Welcome back, Matt.
Thanks, Greg. It's good to be back. And we are coming at you today with a dynamic duo, a couple of great friends of ours, the Monroes, that we were lucky enough to work with and teach with in Venezuela for, well, let's see, at least 4 years, I believe it was. 3 years. Like I said, it was 3 solid years. So Scotty and Tara are joining us from the great state of Maine for this one. Scotty and Tara, how come you guys are in Maine?
So we came up here. We have this house. This is our summer house usually, but with the pandemic and we've been online all year, so we've spent a bulk of our time working and living up here.
So I probably should have started with this question, but I thought it was a good segue. Anyway, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about where you're presently at? We lived and worked. We didn't live with you, but we worked with you in Venezuela. Had a great time down there. But where are you guys now?
We're working in Mexico City. We're working at the American School Foundation.
The American School Foundation. Scotty, what are you doing there?
I'm teaching IB Economics.
And Tara, how about you?
I'm the PY coordinator and Dean of Academics.
All right. And if it wasn't evident already, we all know that Tara's the reason you guys got hired in the first place. So anyway, we just wanted to put that in there. We all know that's how it usually goes. So let me start with this then. So you guys, Scott, I know you've traveled a ton. And Tara, have you traveled as much as Scott had prior to the point where you two went overseas?
Oh, not even close. I had maybe gone to a few places you could get to by car, but definitely only took one plane ride, I think, or 2 before we went abroad. And so, no, I definitely was much more back to home. And it wasn't really anything on my radar to go online or go abroad. Yeah, to go international. So it was definitely a push from him. But glad he did it. And that's something I ever imagined. It's been amazing.
Okay, so I can just imagine how this conversation went. How did this even come up where you two decided you wanted to go overseas?
All right, I'll tell this side.
Yeah, and then I'll tell my version.
Tara and I started dating my last year in college. And, I was doing my practicum and before we kind of made it official, one of the things I brought up to you, this is probably actually a little further into the relationship. I told you that I wanted to go abroad. I remember sitting in my apartment room senior year, and I emailed an administrator in Bolivia because I randomly saw that there was an opening at the school, and I just wrote them and said, "Sure, hiring for this? Do I have enough experience for this?" And they wrote back and were super honest and just said, "No, typically we're looking for at least 5 years." I wish I knew that isn't totally true because I know, Greg, you went abroad right out of college. So anyway, I'm thinking to myself, okay, in 5 years, I'm going abroad. Like, I'll tell her this when we started getting serious. And I was like, listen, this is something I want to do. I don't know if I made an ultimatum, like it's either you come with me or we kind of go our separate ways. I don't know if it came down to that, but I kind of really pushed that. This is what I want to do. And you kind of, I think, said yes,
I was like, yeah,
thinking
sure.
we wouldn't actually go through with it, right?
Right. You were like, oh, let's buy a house. So let's do these things. And I was like, oh, those are the things that ground you in a place. So we're fine. Like, we're not going to go anywhere now.
Sure.
So then year 5 is coming to, actually, because you guys have talked about this. We start hiring in like November, right? Yeah. So it's my 5th year teaching. And I brought it up to you in like September, October, and said, hey, this is the website. And we went through ASA for our first time. And so you started freaking out when I brought it up again.
Well, we went to the fair, and I just remember like going there with the intent to kind of blow it. So I'm like, well, he doesn't know what I do in elementary school, so I can say whatever I want. He's not going to know I'm lying. And so I thought I was sneaky, but then I got there and I kind of got wrapped into everything. It was, the energy is high, and then you kind of want to sell yourself and you want to be proud of what you do. So I definitely got roped in, and then it was like, okay, fine, 2 years. We'll do just 2 years. And here we are, still abroad.
Year 11.
Year 11. There you go. Do you guys remember what countries you interviewed for at that fair? Because I know besides in Veni, but do you remember, did you interview other places too?
Yeah, we did. We interviewed for some schools in Brazil. We interviewed for actually other schools in Venezuela as well, not just for CPLIC. Where else did we interview for? Brazil?
No, it was just CPLIC and Brazil. And we talked to ECA in Caracas, but we had no experience with IB, so they kind of didn't even consider it.
Right.
And now, when you went to the ASA fair, ASA is typically just South American schools. Obviously, was that your geographic area of choice? Like, this is where we want, and South America or Latin America or bust, or what was it?
Yeah, in the beginning it was, because we liked the fact that, getting back to the U.S. to visit with family wasn't going to be too much. What really sold us with Venezuela, which is what helped us with that decision, was the Spanish as well. So it was close, would be a decent plane ride to be able to get back, not too complicated. And we found Spanish to be valuable. So that really helped with that decision.
Yeah, we wanted to go to Latin America, I think, because Matt, you mentioned that I had traveled previously. And so that's where most of my traveling was. So I knew I liked Latin America.
Yeah, for sure. So then when you finished your stint at our school, you stayed in Venezuela, but at a different school. Where did you go to then?
We went to Escuela Campo Alegre in Caracas. There's like 3 international schools in Caracas, and ECA is the one that serves like the diplomatic community mostly.
I feel like you're at my house. I see kids crawling on the
for our listeners, you see we're meeting on Google Meet, and you can see right behind Scott and Tara, see one of the kids every once in a while goes diagonally down the stairs and hangs off like a monkey. It reminds you of going to Matt's house. You've got 4 different bodies running around. Which one's hurting which one?
I'd love to fly on the wall in Matt's house. That'd be great.
Your kids are clothed, actually, though. So you're already a better parent than I am right there.
For the moment, they are. Be honest.
For the moment, that's right. So when you got hired in Mexico, what job fair did you end up attending for that?
We didn't.
Did you go back to ASA?
No, we ended up signing up for Search Associates, and we were in contact with some schools, but we ended up just writing directly to the American School Foundation in Mexico.
Yeah, there was a French teacher at my school, and he said he was talking to the principal at the high school, and he, mentioned the school, and he's like, you guys would like this place. In Mexico City, I've heard about it. I had heard about it previously, how great a city it was, and so it kind of piqued my interest. So I went to their website, saw that there were positions for both of us. And also the school it's a really large school. There's like 2,000 students. So it's really, really big. That kind of appealed to us as well, because we CPLIC was a very small school. ECA in Caracas was really small as well. It was shrinking. So we're kind of looking forward to a larger community.
Yeah. How many students are a part of that school community right now, roughly?
In Mexico City?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the high school, there's like 700-800 students.
Holy cow, really?
In Tara, in the lower school, they call it the lower school, or the upper school instead of the high school. But it's like 700 each section. So you're talking about 2,100 students total, probably.
Wow, that's excellent.
So tell us a little bit about your school sizes. I know we're in COVID right now, but if you were in regular classes, how many students do you guys cap off at in elementary and in high school?
So in elementary, we typically have in the 900s, close to 1,000.
It's that many? Okay.
Yeah, when we're at full capacity. We're the largest division within the school. So,
classroom size?
Classroom size is about 24.
It's the same in the upper school as well.
Yeah, we have for each classroom in the lower school, we have 8 classrooms. We have 8 English teachers and 3 Spanish teachers per grade level.
Just out of curiosity, what kind of student population do you have as far as passport holders and nationalities and mother tongues? And you know what I'm talking about. What kind of a school is that right now?
So it's interesting because on paper, it depends on what you're looking at in terms of the passport. We do have a very high population of local students, so Mexican students, but we are, I don't know, I feel like our international population, at least what we've seen in the lower school, it does seem like we are becoming more international, and we have students from a variety of different parts of the world. I wouldn't say we're half, but I think that we're definitely we're becoming more international.
Yeah, I would say in the upper school, it's probably 30% foreigners and about 70% locals.
Okay. Not quite a host national school, but there's still enough diversity within the student demographics.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, you see a decent amount of Americans and Koreans. Those are probably the two biggest demographics.
What do you guys like about living in Mexico City? Like if you wanted to pitch Mexico City to somebody who's thinking of coming there with a family, what would you, I can't wait to hear this. What do you like about it?
Food. Food is number one,
Definitely
for sure.
Food.
I knew it.
Food. Mexican food is just the best. Whether it's like a restaurant, street food, doesn't matter. The tacos are just out of this world good. So we've really enjoyed that. Like it comes to the point where like, we're like, oh, we should save some money and not go out to eat as much. And it's just so hard not to, no? We have our places, you walk out your door and like within a block, you're at some really good like taco restaurants. So that's number one.
Definitely.
The city's also great. With kids, it has a lot of good parks.
Really good shape.
Yeah,
the parks are really
shape.
taken care of, so they're beautiful.
Yep.
Really? I've never heard that before. That's so cool.
Yeah, if you're in the decent neighborhoods, there's a lot of good parks. Each neighborhood kind of has its own park, so you can always kind of jump around too if you want.
The city's pretty clean too. And so in addition to being able to use the parks, I mean, you can walk on the streets. We take the kids with their scooters and bikes, and we'll go from our apartment to a restaurant that's kind of across the city a little bit. It's great. Some of the sidewalks are in better shape than others, but I mean, in general, it's clean and it's well taken care of.
Mm-hmm. Those are the two biggest.
There's also a lot to do. So, I mean, depending on what your interest is, there's just on the outskirts of the city, you can do hiking, you can do mountain biking. You see a lot of people doing road bikes. There's a variety of things that are there for entertainment. You have all sorts of groups. I mean, with the pandemic, it's a little different now, but there's always concerts. There's always visitors coming in. And so there's no shortage of events.
So if I can jump in real quick, one of the best, Mexico in general, but Mexico City in particular maybe is it's you feel like you're in a foreign country, but there's enough creature comforts from back in the United States where it's a great transition from somebody coming abroad, because you have Costco, you have Home Depot, you have Walmart, right? Each year NBA teams come down and play. The Patriots came down and played at their Azteca Stadium, and so you have all of these things that make you feel like you're close enough to the U.S., but yet you're in a foreign country. And that's fantastic, because coming from Venezuela, it was a shock. In other places previous to Venezuela, but Matt, that for both of us, that was our first abroad experience.
Yeah, I remember having lunch at your place one day, and Scotty, you busted out some cheese that I don't know if you asked for permission, because Tara got all over you for that at lunch one day. So I can totally empathize with that too. And I was like, ooh. Back away from the cheese, Scott.
Oh, yeah. Luxury.
That's precious.
Since we're talking about housing and places that you live, and Mexico City, if I'm not mistaken, is massive population. It's a huge city. And your school has been there for a long time. I think it's a well-established school in our circle of international education. And just tell us a little bit about when you guys landed, how did the housing work out?
So when we first arrived, the school puts us up in a hotel for a number of nights. And that's where they do the first kind of induction, where they talk about, just what it's like in the city, things to look for, what's coming in the next couple of days, just a lot of the legal procedures with your visa, all that kind of stuff. And they do all of that in the hotel. And then that's part of the day. And then the other part of the day, there's a committee of teachers who volunteer and they pair you up. And so you go with that person, and you just kind of talk about what it is that you're looking for a type of apartment. They go with you most of the time, and they can help you with the Spanish if you're not fluent or comfortable with the language, to make appointments, to see places. It's kind of like a little buddy that you go around with. And so they'll show you some of the markets and some of the shops to go. They'll help you to see the apartments. They'll help with communicating with various landlords or real estate agents. And you find your own apartment. The school does give a stipend. It's part of our paycheck. And so it's up to us to, how much you want to pay. You can pay more than what that stipend supposedly is, because essentially it's, in your check. Yeah. So with the two of us, we each were able to, we had our stipend. Initially, we had a little bit of a hard time when we first got to the city, because there's a lot of pressure to find a place within a week. And it takes a little bit of time for contracts and everything. And so we ended up staying at the hotel a little longer than our initial place. They extended it for us, which was really generous, because, we needed a few extra days for paperwork. We ended up moving because it just wasn't a good fit in the end. But
after 2 years, we switched apartments. But it's important to say, too, we came down with Tara's mother. She was generous enough to come with us to take care of the kids when we were looking for apartments.
Yes.
Without her, I don't know how we would have done that. That would have been difficult.
I did the same thing in Cambodia when I arrived. The school at the time had put me in a hotel for a week or two, and it gave me a chance to get used to the cohort. So I got to know the other new teachers that were coming in. There's a lot of schools that do that. So they can arrange everything for you while you have housing. And in the meantime, after a strenuous morning of all of the bureaucratic stuff, then you have the afternoon to go off with your mentor or your caretaker, whoever the volunteer teacher is. Or some schools have realtors that sign up. You go look for your own place, and it's basically on you. So they give you the money and you go find a place. Do most of the teachers live in the same area as you do?
It's not really too close to school. The school's located in one of those in-between neighborhoods. No, it's not a great neighborhood, but it's not a bad neighborhood. No, but it's not a neighborhood where teachers live. We live in a neighborhood that's actually probably one of the closest to school in terms of where teachers live. But teachers are concentrated in like these three neighborhoods.
Yeah, kind of a handful.
They're known to be like the expat neighborhoods of Mexico City.
The school doesn't have these houses and apartments set aside year after year through other teachers. You're going off completely away from school. Do they help you with the paperwork and signing all that stuff too, or no?
Yeah, they have. I forget how they're called a fiador. A fiador is it's like a guarantee for the landlord that you, the renter, have support, financial support.
Right. The school backs you up on all that stuff as a co-signer, because you can't just show up as an American and just hey, I'm here, and you could leave in the middle of the night. So the school is going to take care of whatever happens, and that's their backup, right?
Correct.
And one last thing, and then I'll get over to Matt again. We all had cars in Venezuela, and we all did it different ways, right? Did you guys get a car before you got down there through another teacher? Did you get a hand-me-down, or did you wait till you got there? How did it work?
Yeah, so we were thinking about buying a car soon after getting there, but it's so easy to get around in the city. They got an extensive metro line, but Uber takes you anywhere you need to go, and it's really cheap. If you want to go travel, the price is great. So if you want to take a trip to the airport, which is about 20, 30 minutes away, it's $10 one way.
Is it El Uber?
El Ride.
So Uber's great.
Throw a little plug there.
Right.
No, but so we ended up actually once I transitioned from the classroom into my new role, then that's when we decided that we were invested in staying for a few more years, and we wanted to get a car so we could travel and do day trips a little bit more easily on our own schedule, and just say, tomorrow let's just go, and we didn't have to worry about arranging for transportation. So
yeah, when it comes to Mexico City too, we're one of the few teachers I think that have a car. Most teachers don't, because it is so easy to get around. And I know the car can be more difficult finding a place to park. That's an issue. Whereas if you're in an Uber, you just get dropped off and picked back up. It's nice and easy. So sometimes we have a car, but we're let's call an Uber for this.
Yeah,
it's just much easier.
Matt's my Uber.
But with 3 kids, we're we need to get a car so we can go outside the city. There's 20 million people in the city, but 45-minute drive, you're in the woods walking, hiking. So we felt it would be good to get our own car if we were going to stay for a few more years.
Matt, when they talk about woods in Mexico City, is that the first thing that comes to mind for you too? I can't believe I'm stuck on this word woods. He just said woods. You have woods down there? I thought Mexico is agave plants and tequila.
That too.
Right. We've been there as well.
And baseball players. Am I generalizing, Matt? I'm sorry.
Actually, Maddie, they have a nice brand new baseball stadium you'd love to go to, man.
I'm in. So I will pay for tickets. Yes, I'm in. I don't need to be persuaded at all for that. But they have a winter league there, correct? Just much like Benny did?
There's like 2 seasons, yeah. So they have like the winter league and then it's, I think, the summer league, no? Yeah, because I remember our good friends went to like as many games as they could. They got season tickets. And so I remember there'd be like a 2-month window when there was a whole bunch of games, and then there'd be like a 3-month window with a whole bunch of games.
I have season tickets to Matt's softball games, and I don't pay very much for them. They're actually free, but I'm a season ticket holder for his softball here.
And there's no beer.
No.
I'm going to step us out of Mexico on this one, and let's go to travel, the idea of travel. I know from my time with being around you two, you have two kind of varying philosophies or you started out with two varying philosophies of travel. Scott, you always tended to embrace the frugality of traveling. And Tara, you seem to like to have a roof.
You're so polite.
What are we talking about?
What's been, would you consider your craziest travel adventure and all of the stuff that you two have done?
Oh, geez.
What would you consider to be something like, I cannot believe we actually did that?
I got this. So
there's a few.
Right.
I'm interested to hear which one you say.
Well, there's a couple. I guess the first one, Greg, you're involved in. You know this part.
The border where Elsie was you changed her diaper.
All right, it's year 2 at Seablick, and I remember Elsie was born
Venezuela.
in Venezuela, and so our first daughter was born in September, and we're coming up to Christmas vacation, and we were staying in Venezuela for the break because we didn't want to really. I don't know. I forget why we stayed, but
just travel. Yeah,
just to travel. And so Elsie's like 3 months old, and for some reason, we thought it would be a good idea to travel with Goyo to Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname. And so, do you remember that, Greg? You sat in the back with Elsie, and we traveled that 10-hour car ride to that weird port in eastern Venezuela, and waited on a rock wall for a ferry that would take us to Trinidad.
In the rain,
in the sun, whatever, I forget. It was just
That was just the beginning of the trip. Waiting for the ferry to get out of Venezuela was the longest part of the trip.
It was. Remember, I have a picture of me sitting on this rock wall. Because remember, there weren't seats. Remember that, Greg? And there was no covering. We were just out in the elements. And I'm sitting there on this rock wall with Elsie on my lap.
3 months old.
3 months old. And so,
and we only traveled we each had a backpack, and then we had the baby carrier, the Bajoran carrier, and that was it. And we thought that also was a great idea, which was a little challenging at times.
Oh my God.
But I mean, it was also a really cool, fun trip. I mean, we also did a little bit of off-roading, held her real tight in the back seat.
Remember that, Greg? Yeah.
Yeah, we've done a few crazy things.
So that was probably the craziest. And remember, Greg, we didn't stay in nice places on that trip. They were kind of just like rundown hotels, right?
Well, let's bounce back a little bit here. You know, I do remember after we finally got out of Venezuela, Matt's right about this. You know, you were in your frugality stage. So the three of us stayed in some very, well, let's say frugal areas the whole time. And at one point, I can't remember when it was, but we decided that Tara and I pulled each other aside, and I don't know what you were doing, but Tara and I looked at each other and said, we're staying in a hotel tonight. We're spending $100 tonight for hot water. I remember that to this day. Tara and I looked at each other and said, nope, we're having hot water in a hotel tonight.
Yep.
It was like your intervention. You guys probably need you to sit down.
So you got Greg to break down to the point where he's like, okay, I need to shower. That should tell you what the trip was going like right there. Hey, Tara, elaborate on the off-roading part.
So where was it?
That was Suriname.
It was in Suriname.
Rainbow Tours.
Yep, that's
oh
right.
my Lord, I can't believe you remember that.
And so we wanted there was some beautiful views, and there was some water that we wanted to see. And so we hired this tour company, and it was a Jeep that
one guy.
that we ended up in. And it was quite the adventure to get there. It was very much off-roading. And There was a few times we weren't sure if we were going to make it. There was another time where there was a car coming down and we were going up and there really wasn't anywhere else to go because there was a cliff on one side and big trees on the other. But somehow
Sure.
we managed around. And so it was an adventure.
I'll never forget this, okay? When we had this guy was not your average tour guide, okay? I'll never forget the fact that we were going up the mountain in the rain, and we stopped to see if this other guy that was broken down needed help. Do you remember this?
Yep.
He gets back in the car after we helped that guy get his wheel unstuck in the mud, and we get back into our four-wheel drive Jeep, and I said, thank God we have four-wheel drive. And he looks at me and he says, or us, and he says, oh, you want to go in four-wheel now? And he wasn't even using four-wheel. He was just in two, right? And then he puts it on four-wheel drive, and we went up like it was, it was baby work. It was impressive on that part of our tour. He really knew where to go.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing. He was an interesting character. I remember that.
It was. Well. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Well, Greg, I remember. I think that the part of that trip that sticks out most is we pulled over because we saw this guy on the side of the road with an anteater. Do you remember that?
Yes, with the anteater.
We get out and he's talking to him in that local language, and he's explaining to us that the guy is. What was it? It was the baby, wasn't it?
He was holding the baby, and he was waiting for mom to come out because they're going to eat them both.
Yep, that's right. We're going to eat the anteaters.
Luring the mom by the cries of her baby. Like my heart sank. Here I am with a 3-month-old, and I'm just holding her so tight. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so sad.
Yep.
But at that point, we realized we were in a country that had no infrastructure. Well, more than Guyana did, right? Suriname had infrastructure. The Dutch left Guyana completely. And then the Dutch had left at least infrastructure in Suriname. Right. What a great trip, man. I loved it.
Yeah, you forget all the hardships, right? And you remember all the good stuff, thank God.
Well, the one hardship that I can remember, though, and Tara, this is definitely your strength of travel, is that when we went across the border from Guyana to Suriname, we had to travel with... what was his name? Billy's bus or something like that.
Goodness.
We got stuck on one side. We went over with the ferry across, and it was pouring rain. And the minute the ferry stopped, everybody was running past us, remember? And we're like, oh, we'll just walk and we'll do the baby thing. She's got a baby. We need to go with her. And they move her up to the front. They check her in the border, which is just this little gate. Once again, it's pouring rain and there's nothing there. It's a jungle. The bus is waiting for everybody, and they signed you in first. And they said, Scott, you two men, you must go to the back of the line. So 200 people in front of us, and you're checked through, and you had to wait for everybody else to be stamped through the border. Do you remember that?
I forgot that, but now I remember it. Yep.
If you guys remember this, you and Elsie were sitting there underneath like a little overhang, and we're waiting. The bus left without us, without the tickets. The guy shows up about an hour and a half later, and we can't fill it up. So he's trying to charge us. He almost stopped the bus to charge us for extra seats. Remember that, Scotty?
Yep, I remember that.
That's the only time I've ever threatened a man in another country with his own life. He was going to dump us with Elsie, with a 3-month-old. He was going to dump us in the jungle because we weren't going to pay for his extra seats. Oh,
which was called. It was the company that they overbooked the first bus. So, it was that. Yeah, there was a few times my heart was racing on that trip for a variety of reasons. So that was definitely a frustration.
Well, that's all coming back to me now. Yeah, because I remember we booked a ticket on the other side of the border, and then when we got there, like, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about," and I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, that's par for the course down in South America. But, Matt and I haven't seen you in a long time, though. So tell us some news stories. We want to hear some travel stories that don't involve Matt and I.
Well, we just ventured back up here in our most recent trip. We drove from Mexico City to Massachusetts and did not stop. So 49 hours.
Yeah.
With, I don't know what kind of car.
We have a Ford Escape. So it's like a CRV or a RAV4 size car.
With 3 kids and a dog.
Yep. So we had 3 kids in the back seat and a dog on their lap.
Were you being hunted? I mean, there are hotels, there's restaurants, there's places to stop, right, Matt? I think there's
a nice way to say it.
Oh my God.
You just made my blood pressure go up about 600 points.
Oh, hey, I got to say, Tara agreed with me on this. It was easier to just keep driving and switch driving because we'd get
Sure.
home faster and be comfortable.
And then it
faster.
was just done.
And it
we
was
didn't
done.
have to unpack to go to a hotel and then sleep.
Yeah.
And then,
It would have taken that much longer.
Yeah.
It would have been a whole nother day traveling.
yeah.
So it worked out. Kids were champs. The dog was a champ. It worked out great.
Yeah. And plus, you saved that $23.99 Scott would have spent on a room otherwise, and then there you go. That's amazing. Like, I would imagine at the end of the trip, you're just delirious, hanging over the steering wheel. Just get me home.
I think, driving in the United States is kind of more boring. You're on the interstate highway system, right? It looks all the same in most of the U.S. But that was the easy part of the trip. But you remember going up to the border. So if you leave Mexico City at like 4 a.m, you can get up to the border of Laredo, Texas in about like 12 hours. Now a little less, actually.
Yeah.
It's like 11 if there's no traffic. And so
Sure.
at one point, we started hitting traffic on the highway, and we didn't know what it was from, but you could see the line down the highway. It was hours long. Well, thankfully in Mexico, right, the rules are a little lax. And so because we weren't like a big tractor trailer, I drove on the side of the highway where there was this dirt road.
Where there's probably glass and could pop our tire. And so I was real comfortable.
Yep. And so I'm driving on the side of this highway, passing all these tractor trailers, miles and miles of tractor trailers. There's like 2 or 3 cars doing this with us, kicking up dust and, oh man.
Again, going over rocks that could pop a tire.
Oh yeah. And we did that for like 30 minutes.
At
and
least.
it saved us hours of traffic. But you could never do that. Yeah. So essentially we're in the emergency or the breakdown lane.
El Rebel.
Yeah. I would never drive like that in the Middle East ever. So I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm imagining it. So yeah, for sure. Okay. I'm going to skip away from travel for a second then. And so people that might be listening to this, we're appealing to single people who are looking to go overseas, people with families, and you obviously have 3 kids now. So what would you say have been some of the positives of living abroad with your kids and kind of living this lifestyle?
Schools on average are much better than probably your average school in the United States. Right? Not to like bash on the public school system, but these schools definitely attract, I think,
we have kids coming from a variety of backgrounds, and it just brings a different dynamic to us.
Sure.
It, definitely, I think there's different levels of instruction that take place, especially as an international school. They, are doing a lot with professional development. But I also think, too, it's just the dynamics.
Yeah.
It's different, and it's really cool to expose the kids to that. I don't know, what would be another? I mean, just the travel, too. I think that even just when we're here in the United States, there's so much possibility for us to do things that aren't far away, but we don't. We end up kind of hunkered down and just comfortable. But when we're abroad and we make it a point to do a day trip on a weekend, to plan ahead for our vacation, to go on to visit, that's also a huge difference that we're able to do it it wouldn't be necessarily as easy to do so.
For sure. Okay. So then aside from benefits of the family too, what about professionally? How have you two found this to benefit you as professionals? Just in your 11 years overseas in general.
Just being surrounded by like super passionate teachers, that are always trying to improve themselves. And so just being with that environment, it just forces you to up your game, whereas again, not to bash on the United States, there's a lot of great teachers here in the United States, but it's just a little more isolated in your classroom, I felt, in the United States, whereas at these international schools here, because you're part of the same small community, you're with each other a lot. And so you end up getting a lot more kind of informal professional development by just throwing ideas around.
Yeah, I definitely think that, it takes a lot to take the risk to leave your comforts of home. And there's a certain aspect of who you are that enjoys that adventure. And I think part of that too is just you're pushing yourself. You're pushing yourself out of the creature comforts. You're pushing yourself to try new things. And with that is an open-mindedness. It's just been great to learn from other people. Like you said, just really passionate, very open, very adventurous people they're fun to talk to. And it's just wonderful. And so, we can sit down and have a conversation. And I can say, I'm struggling with this. I want to learn more about this. And there's always somebody that wants to join the conversation or has a suggestion. And so you're a community and you do so much together. You don't just go to work and come home. You you end up this little family, and you hang out on the weekends, you get to know each other. And so,
Sure. Yeah. So when you're saying it takes a lot to leave, I agree with this too. Leaving the creature comforts and learning how to exist without those is kind of its own little skill. So when you come back, how do you guys reconnect? Like, what gets you reconnected with who you are, where you're from, what grounds you, what kind of brings you back once you're home and you're like, okay, all right, this is me. This is what I'm about.
well, I think at least here,
our house in Maine.
Yeah, we have this place that we come to each year, and that's a big reason why we have this place to accommodate no matter where we live. But right now, we're really personalizing it, and Scott in particular has really gotten into gardening and things. So we're creating a lot within the property here that's our own, and so that's we even in our apartment in Mexico City, we're fortunate to have a space where we can have a lot of plants and things. And so we definitely experiment and try to grow what we can there. But really establishing for the group here with just growing a lot here, I think that's also what grounds us is those hobbies that we can really dive into over here.
Yeah, I mean, so you have your folks' place. We go to your parents' place. That's kind of like almost our real home base. We still have a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
The kids love going there. So there's that. There's our house in Maine. Again, we bought this place, guys, after you had already left Venezuela. And we got it in our transition to Caracas after 5 years. We wanted this place because we felt we needed to give our kids some grounding in some place in the United States to say, this is ours. This is home. Because we didn't have that. Yeah. As the kids were getting older, we were kind of, I don't know about worried, but thinking about it anyway. To what extent are our kids going to feel homeless without a place, right? Placelessness in a sense. Because again, they're not Venezuelan or Mexican. They're not American because they don't live there. So we felt we needed to buy a place and ground ourselves in somewhere.
Yes, I agree. Stacy and I had done the same thing too. And if you ask any of our boys where they're from, they'll tell you, well, we live in Wisconsin, but we're Minnesotans.
Right.
And so, we've tried to give them something to anchor and attach to. Because it's crazy when you talk to some kids overseas and you ask them where they're from and you get I'm not sure.
Who's your mom from? Where's your dad from?
And that can't be an easy way to grow up. I mean, it's not a bad way, but also not having that identity can be a challenge.
It's a little bit more expensive for Matt, though, because his boys also reply once in a while. When you ask them where they're from, they say, well, are we going to go to our other home in the Maldives? And that's not exactly a cheap vacation, even if we're, coming from close by, because it is an expensive place especially for a family. Yeah. But, and I'll joke, joking aside, most of the teaching couples that I've run into overseas have to have some kind of a root system, which ends up being not just mom and dad's house. You actually invest in a home, whether or not you rent it out or Airbnb it, for some parts of the year. Most of the people I've talked to do not, and they have their own home for their own kids to go back to in the summertime. So it sounds like that's what you guys do. I know your parents had a nice house in Boston, I think, when I visited you last.
Yeah, the western part.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. But now you have your own place, and that's going to be great, especially if you have a room for me.
We do.
We do.
Whenever you want to come. No, this place is great because, again, in the summers we come up here because this place is a winter getaway place because it's near a ski mountain in Maine. And so we're able, when we're in Mexico City or when we're in Venezuela, we rent it out for a ski season from November all the way to May. And so people rent it for the ski season, and then it's perfect. Our summer begins and we come back and it's ours. So it works out great.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Another question. So when you're gone and you're away from home, what do you miss the most? Whether it's a creature comfort or an activity, what do you miss the most when you're away from home?
It's not Walmart. It sounds like they have them there.
I remember no, definitely not Walmart. No, I remember when we were in Venezuela, it depends on where you are currently,
Sure.
That was toilet paper there and power.
Correct.
And water.
I mean, I remember when we're in Venezuela, particularly, it was the food, because you guys remember the restaurant choices in Venezuela. There wasn't a lot of variety. Going to the grocery store, we ended up buying the same things because they didn't get a lot of great imports. And if they did, it was like triple the price of the United States. coming back home, living in Venezuela was definitely the food. In Mexico, it's harder because the city is so awesome. Mexico City is one of those places where I say, I wish I could live there for the rest of my life. But we don't have any like family or friends there, no? And so the only thing keeping us from wanting to lay down permanent roots in that city. But it's an unbelievable city. So I would say leaving Mexico City, it's more space because it's a tightly packed city. So your apartment, again, we have a 3-bedroom apartment with 3 kids. And so it gets crowded. So
Yeah. And I would agree with that.
Okay. You with Kay there, Greg?
Try not to touch any of the electronics while I move around and get comfortable.
Okay, so I'm going to throw another one at you then. So let's say looking out 5-10 years from now, what kind of forecast are you two throwing out there? I don't want to put you in hot water with your job or your school or anything like that. Is this question off limits, or do you have some hopes for, here's what maybe we're thinking about, or here's something we'd like to try?
So it's tough. I mean, we're getting close to our maximum years in our current place. And so it is a conversation that we need to have. And we're not sure actually where we're going to go. It's very much a topic of conversation. So, do we come back here? Do we do we look for, another place abroad? If we do, what region of the world do we want to look into? So it's a conversation.
Sorry.
Hard to know.
No, we talk about this often. For our next, assignment, maybe we're going to check abroad, I think, and see kind of what we have available to us. No, but we have talked about going back to that. But we don't know. It's so hard. You know how it is. You go into a job fair thinking, I want to go here. No options available to you there, and you end up, like you said, Matt, I heard it in a previous podcast, you never thought you would live in Venezuela.
Yeah. The 2 places I said I'd never go are where I've gone. So, and it's worked out great. I wouldn't have it any other way.
So we'll see. Yeah, it's so hard.
Okay, Greg, how are we doing on time? Because I wanted to jump into one quick story, and then Scotty said he had a story he wanted to share.
Well, it's definitely story time, Matt. I mean, we all 4 of us have stories. I'd love to hear some stories.
Scotty, do you want to go first, or can I tell my favorite Scott and Tara story?
Dude, I want to hear it.
Okay. My favorite story about you guys is you're the only people I've known who've gotten paid to make babies. So when I give people this background story, this is awesome. So I remember when you guys first got pregnant with Elsie. She was born, September 2011?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Wow. Actually, okay. Good memory. I remember when you were telling us about this, and I was like, well, where are you going to have the baby? And you're like, well, we'll have it here, because we got the insurance and blah, blah, blah. This works and all that. I was just like, you guys are insane. Like, we're in a port. But mind you, I hadn't had kids yet. So after a couple of kids, it's like, whatever, you can have them in an elevator. It's going to work out. But and so I remember talking about it with Stacy that night going, they're going to have the kid here. This is insane. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Like, how are they not scared about this? But whatever. You ended up finding a great doctor, Dr. Guevara, I believe, who we ended up using too when we were there.
That's right.
And so you go in, you have the kid. I think everything works out fine. Everybody was smiling in the pictures, and they kept Tara alive, obviously.
Yep.
You paid the doctor in Venezuela in the local currency. Scott, do you remember how much you paid to have Elsie?
God, it's so hard. No, I don't remember. In the local currency, I forget what the amount was.
Okay. It wasn't a bad amount. So then, what you then did was you had to submit the receipts.
Correct.
If I get this wrong, stop me. But then you had to submit the receipts to our insurance company in the U.S. to get reimbursed.
Correct.
But that was not in local currency. That was at the official exchange rate for U.S. dollars, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So I think I remember the equivalent. So it was probably about 8,000 bolivares, which was about $1,000 US at the time. I think that's what it cost to have a baby. You're right. That was artificial. Remember, we bought bolivares on the black market. So the government fixed their currency at 4-1. So $1 was 4 bolivares. But when we bought bolivares, we bought it in the black market exchange. So we got 8-1. And so when we paid for Elsie to be born, we paid with the bolivares we got on the black market at the 8-1 exchange rate. So when we submitted the receipts, they repaid us at the official exchange.
Yeah, which ended up being thousands of dollars.
Right. We made $1,000 as a result.
I think it was more than that, actually.
It was like 1,500 or something like that. It wasn't.
It was enough where it made you go, whoa, wait a minute. Because then, of course, the year later, we had Karoo in the U.S. and we had such not great insurance coverage. We ended up paying 25 grand out of pocket. Let me make fun of Scott's frugality, but Scott also he can't hear because he's got 25 grand extra dollars jammed in his ears. So at 26,500 extra dollars jammed in his ears. So, but I've always loved that story. I was like, yeah. And then that same thing happened with Emma too, I believe as well. Correct?
It happened with all
It
three.
wasn't as much though. I think that was the most with Elsie, or was it the most with
No,
Emma?
it went in the opposite direction. So guys, as time went on, inflation and the black market exchange rate exploded. So you guys were there. The exchange rate was 8, 10 to 1. By the time you guys left, it was probably like 50 to 1. But they kept the fixed exchange rate at like 4 to 1 or 7 to 1. So as time went on, that reimbursement from medical receipts actually increased. So for him, we made that 4.
Yeah, when you stop making money on having kids, I mean, it's time to leave.
Exactly.
What's the point? Either you got to stop having kids or it's time to go and find a new country that'll pay you to have kids.
It worked out.
Someone's going to come after us now.
I
for
know,
this money.
right? Maybe we should.
Oh, maybe we're supposed to talk about that. Yeah. There'll be an official Venezuelan government convoy on your front steps tomorrow. And then the car will get stuck pulling out of your driveway. So anyway. Okay, Scotty, you said you had a story you wanted to tell. So tell us, go ahead, drop one on us, man.
Yes, I've loved from the beginning how you guys are focused on funny police stories. And that got me thinking. I was like, what's my best police story in Venezuela? And so this happened at the very beginning of our 5th year in Puerto La Cruz. So you guys had already left. And I remember it was our 5-year wedding anniversary, and we wanted to do something for ourselves. So we went back to Venezuela like 2 weeks early before we had to report back to the new school year. And I don't know if you remember the kid's nanny, Joanna. And Joanna became like a family member, and we had like full trust in her. She was fantastic. And so we asked her if she could watch Emma and Elsie for, it was like a long weekend. She would stay at our apartment watching the kids. And you remember where we lived. It was protected and guarded, so it was good. Yeah. And so she agreed. And so Tara and I decided to go to Los Roques. And that's for people that don't know Los Roques. It's this gorgeous archipelago off the coast of Venezuela. And so it's white sand beaches, just beautiful. And we're like, this is the perfect place for our 5-year anniversary. So, so what we did was we actually paid for a private charter to take us there because they didn't have flights from Puerto La Cruz. So we had to drive like 4 hours to another airport, and we paid a guy to fly us there. And so we had to drive out there. And I don't know if you guys remember, but driving from like Puerto La Cruz anywhere was just like a single road highway with a lot of potholes and no street lights. You're in the middle of nowhere. And so when we do our vacation, right? So it was like 3 days or 4 days, and we land back at this airport, and we have to drive 4 hours to get back to our apartment. The thing was, it kind of was cutting close to sundown, and we didn't want to be driving on the road when it was dark out now because there's no lighting. And so we're driving, we're hustling back. Anyways, there's a lot of police stops along the way, and one of these police stops, the guy hears me with an accented Spanish say hola or something like that. So he's like, oh, pull over. And, we knew what was going to happen. He was going to try to get some money. So he's asking for all the paperwork, and we give it to him, and everything's good. The paperwork's up to date. Everything's in our name. Everything looks good.
Were you wearing shoes?
I was.
Yes.
Yeah. But we were pretty ragged, though, because we kind of got food poisoning on this vacation, if you remember that. So he asked me to get out of the car, and I'm like, here goes. And so I was like, what's he gonna say to try to get money out of us? And he's looking at the paperwork, and he's like, it says here, your car is blue. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, it's gray. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, your car's not blue, it's gray. And I'm like, no, it's blue. Look at it. And the car was kind of a grayish blue. It's like a navy bluish. And I'm like, no, it's blue. And he's like, no, it's gray. I was like, he's like, this is a big fine. And I'm like, you're kidding. And so this cop, to get money out of us, was sticking to this point. He was changing the color of our car. And that's how he held us up. And I gave
a long time.
A while. It was like 30 minutes. And I broke down because we had to make it back before sundown. So I ended up paying the guy money. And we were in the middle of nowhere. And so I was just like, let's just do this. And we gave him like the equivalent of like $20, which is tons of money in Venezuela.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's probably one of my favorite cop stories.
Car color. It's gray. So your car, okay. So it was just entered as gray on the title, though.
Blue.
Oh, it was in. Oh God.
Yep.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I was kind of impressed with that. He's trying to figure out what to do, and that's what he found. So I was like, all right.
You know, we have to maybe try and find some Venezuelan cops we can have on here to tell stories how they got money out of gringos, because that could be a whole nother show itself.
Oh, they're pretty good, right?
Yeah. By the way, Scott, the red shirt you're wearing today is beautiful.
So tell us a little bit about the police in Mexico City.
Sorry, what was that?
Police in Mexico City.
You know what? There's no good stories that I can remember.
No.
I mean, I've gotten, I don't know, one cop saw me with a cell phone and asked me for money, threatened me with a high fine. But no interesting stories actually with cops.
And if anything, they were just kind of yelling at you because we all were in the car and the kids were in the back seat. And so they were like, you have to be more safe. You have children. Take care of your children. Get off your phone. And like, we were kind of which, I mean, fair enough. Yeah, get off your phone.
Yeah.
But Venezuelan police were the most interesting. Mexican police, not so much.
Well, I tell you what, it just depends on the country, right? It depends on the country you're in. And it's, even though we have these stories about Venezuela, those things happened at the wrong time. That was the worst. That was part of the living there, is you had to get used to it and paying off the cops. And I remember in other countries I've lived in, it was the same. And they would just track you down because of you're white and you're driving, and that's a source of income that they don't have yet, so they can make something up. So that's an awesome story.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. I heard you guys, what was his name? Ken, you interviewed somebody, and he was saying he tried never to pay bribes. I've always tried that, but it's just so hard to do that now.
That depends on the country. And I tried to, that's what I learned from Ken also, is that every country you live in, it's a different story. I'll tell you guys a little story then. In Cambodia, I was riding a hog like I do here. It must have been another 120cc little bike, right? These guys would see this big gringo sitting on this bike, tooling around. They were not armed in Cambodia. They would have a uniform on, and they made no money whatsoever. I mean, nothing. So the currency there was both local and American dollar. They knew if there's a white guy coming along, they would stop me and try and get money out of me. So the first year, maybe the first 6 months I lived there, if they flagged me down, I'd stop and he'd make up something. And, your blinker's not working. And I'm like, turn on the blinker and it's blinking. And he's like, no, your other one, it's broken. So you couldn't argue with him. You'd just end up giving him like $2 and they could all eat lunch. After about 6 months, I got sick of it, and I started just finding ways around. So I'll never forget one time I pull around at this light, take a right, and they had set up their police stop right on the right-hand side of the road, right at the corner. So as soon as I went into traffic, I hadn't even sped up yet. There's 5 guys out in 2 lanes and starting to spread out. So I gunned it, and I went right around him, and I'm flipping him the finger. I was just so bad at this. I mean, I couldn't handle it anymore. I was like, you're not getting my money. So I just one-handed, driving one-handed and flipping him off with the other. And if I had my money out, I would have waved it at him too, saying, you're not getting it today. You're not getting it today. It makes for great stories, but it's not always great living in an environment like that. So I'm glad that Mexico is a lot safer as far as corruption and stuff. It sounds like a great place to go.
It is. Mexico's fantastic. The city's unbelievable. The travel, it's funny. We actually don't do any international travel from Mexico like we did in Venezuela. No, in Venezuela, you're always looking to we love Venezuela, but you kind of need a break from it after being there for a while. You go to another place.
Well, Mexico has so much to offer though, too, right? I mean, you have in every direction of Mexico City, you must have a different environment, a different thing to actually go and investigate. A different, whether it's desert or if it's woods or if it's water, there must be a ton of things to do. Yeah,
and great scuba diving. I know you guys love that. The scuba diving in Mexico is fantastic. We haven't done it in a while just because it's an issue of who's going to take care of the kids. But But yeah, so there's just so much to do in Mexico. We could be here 10 years and still not see everything we want to see. So you don't really need to do international travel. You just kind of.
Scotty and Tara, as always, it was fantastic to see you guys again. It's been way too long. I can't wait to get together with you guys and see you. And we sure appreciate you coming on here to take a couple of moments to talk with us. And we'll get this out and spread the word to your family and friends so they can hear some of your fantastic stories too. Much appreciated.
Thank you, gentlemen. It was great talking.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to see you guys.
And to our massive listening audience in how many countries are we in now, Greg?
I think we're up to 50 or more.
Ooh.
That's right. They love us all around the world, at least in 50 places. Thank you for tuning in and checking out our podcasts. Remember, if you have any complaints, you can send those to internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Make sure you issue that to Greg. He handles the complaint department. And we are also on Instagram, ITP Expats. Check us out. Scotty, thank you for following us. I think we have like 8 followers now. That's fantastic.
My mom's on there too, so it's 9.
Oh, ooh, excellent. And we're on Twitter, but we don't often have as much to say on there. So this is Matt. I'm signing off.
Well, you're Matt the Family Guy, and I'm...
This is Matt the Family Guy signing off. And Greg?
I can't do it either.
Greg the Family Guy. Greg the illegitimate family guy somewhere around the world. All right, that's a different podcast.